Well, good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here and talking about water conservation and how it fits in the Colorado Water Plan. Kevin and I are going to do a little tag team and kind of give you a little bit of history and perspective on how that is before we hand it off to Kevin Bomer and the esteemed panel who are going to provide color commentary on water conservation and those kind of things. My role in this was pretty simple. I was the governor's appointee on the Interbasin Compact Committee and co-chaired the subcommittee on water conservation. And we worked pretty hard over the last year or two putting together some recommendations about that 400,000 acre-foot objective that's in the water plan. And so to kind of give you some background of how we got there and what that really means, Kevin's going to has a short presentation he's going to do. So Kevin?
I'm on the mic here. Thanks, Wayne. Doug, I thought you were going to list my weight. Weighing it at 180 pounds, when you introduced me, it was pretty funny. It sounded like a prize fight start, but we're going to talk a little bit about conservation and the water plan. I know a lot of you guys have probably already heard a lot of this presentation, but we're going to start off really quickly. If I can do this. Oh, there we go. Okay, there it is. Just put some definitions up, just to kind of get everybody on the same page. And these are some that have been used in the industry for a while. And I'll just leave those up for a little bit as we start off. And the difference between water conservation and water efficiency, you know, the way I view it is water efficiency is kind of a vehicle to attain water conservation savings. And the water efficiency, though, is really looking at how to get wring the most out of the water that you're using it and not really compromise the end product you want to have. So whether it be a shower or a car wash or a manufacturing process, you want to try to be as efficient as possible, and through that you can get some water conservation savings. Not all the time, but generally speaking, yes, you can do that. So we're starting on the same page. So as we went through the water plan, creating that document, massive document, I got the dubious distinction to work on the M&I water conservation section, the reuse, and the land use section. So I'm going to go from water efficiency and conservation to land use, and then to tee it off for the rest of the panel there. We'll go on. All right, so everybody's seen this graph. A lot of people have seen this graph already. This is what we're facing by 2050, doubling population. This is really the crux of the matter. As James Eklund likes to say, we're not, we can't grow the next 5 million people like we grew the last 5 million people. And like I always say, is we're not making any more water, but we're making a whole lot more people. So what do? This is a big issue. This is the kind of crux. So, as Wayne was alluding to, the no and low regrets was a process that the IBCC went through, and they said, okay, well, what's the bare minimum we have to do to help, move this forward? The 4 legs of the stool, conservation and reuse being one of those. And so this was kind of the conservation strategies that the subcommittee of the IBCC came up with, and then forwarded to the rest of the IBCC. And as you see number 2 there, establish statewide conservation goals with intermittent benchmarks. So really kind of wrestle around with that. And how the IBCC subcommittee came up with that was looking at, okay, from SWASI 2010, Statewide Water Supply Initiative, we had a low, medium, and high conservation strategies. And so the medium was about, I think it was about 340,000 acre feet by 2050 would be necessary to hit that medium level, which meant that you'd have to do a number of best practices to a certain level of implementation to attain that savings. And that's kind of the basis of it. And so what they did was they were saying, well, that's great, that's a medium, but maybe we should push a little bit more and add about 60,000 acre feet onto that to really push it, to call it a stretch goal, let's call it an aspirational goal. And that's just kind of so we can push a little bit further than we're talking about medium. And the water providers out there are doing a really great job. I mean, the face of this has changed dramatically. I started in this field in about 2002, and it's gone 180 degrees, and full circle at the same time. It's changed dramatically, and we've got a lot of new data, a lot of good science behind this stuff. And a lot of really engaged people, and the good thing is that it's really becoming more integrated into water resources planning. This is just a graphic showing the low, medium, and high demands and how they're made up. You won't be able to read that probably, but this was a graphic in the water plan that we thought we might throw up here just to illustrate a point there. But it's really kind of going beyond that medium, going between medium and high basically, and saying, okay, if we can push that and get to that point, that would be great. That's kind of what we're needing. Now, that's not guaranteed, obviously, and it won't be easy either, I don't think. I mean, we can get a long ways, I think, but we just have to be monitoring and evaluating as we go along to see where we're at. So I'll move on to this. I don't know, Wayne, if you wanted to throw anything on there either, but we're talking about the stretch goal. All right. Well, I'll just keep on rolling.
Hand it off.
All right.
All right.
So we've got the adopt the IBC stretch goal. That was in one of the water conservation chapter, and it's 400,000 acre feet, as Wayne had mentioned before. We wanted to put that in there, and it turned out to be, I think, a good thing. It has something that people can shoot for or shoot at, one of the two, and that's a good thing. I think it's something that people can get their hands around, and it's really very, very concrete. And again, as we update our SWASI process, we're going to be looking at this again and evaluating as we go over time. So this is not set in stone, and this is not a mandatory thing. This is just something to shoot for and see if we can get there. But it gets everybody moving in the same direction, much like our lunch speaker was saying about on the tandem versus the other bike that was going the other way. Another part in the water plan that we really felt strongly about putting in here was the support of water provider management activities. And it's kind of a generic term, but what I'm talking about when I say that is, my office, we can provide technical and financial support to do, really basic things, that every utility it should be doing as a best practice. Some of this is, water rate structures that get your revenue, but also incentivize conservation, water loss programs, water loss and control programs, very big problem out there too. One of the initiatives that really want to look at is using the AWWA M36 manual and have that become the standard that we use in this state, and doing that through statewide trainings for water providers, and really going through that full process. A number of other states are doing a lot with this. California just is starting a 2-year process doing that. New Mexico, I just heard, is starting trainings as well to get all their water providers up to snuff on this one methodology, so it's very consistent and it yields results that you need. And it goes well beyond just saying, well, we produce this much and we sell this much, and that's the difference. This gets into a lot of detail that will be helpful for the bottom line of utilities, frankly. 2 other areas, incentives for outdoor measures, that's a big thing. We haven't really addressed that as fully as we'd like, and then that's a big place where some water can be used more efficiently through incentives for replacing higher water landscapes with lower water landscapes, trainings, maybe some kind of maybe tax incentives, something like that at the state level. We're still trying to figure that out, but these are things that we can kind of help water providers do in their local jurisdiction by bringing our resources to bear on that as well. And of course, water conservation and education outreach, a huge part. I'll talk about some trainings in a minute, and when I get to the land use section on that, that can elaborate a little bit more. But really, this is really talking about, hey, let's move from having water customers to water stewards. Because we've got every utility has a ton of water managers out there as their customers. They're managing their own water at their own meter. And if we can bring other tools to bear and close that feedback loop through technology, through metering technology and information portals, and other education aspects, it'll be a really good thing. The more information I think customers have, they can make those better decisions on how they manage their own water. Strengthening partnerships. This is a really big one. This was a huge theme of the water plan, as you guys know. A lot of collaboration and talking about partnerships. Not only creating partnerships outside the state, but as a state agency, creating partnerships within the state agencies that we work with. We have a lot of silos, like a lot of organizations do, but there's a lot working on that, and I've been, talking and working with folks from DOLA, from CDPHE, from DORA, that I never had met before a couple months ago, and all this water plan has really generated a lot of working together on these things. And one also idea that I wanted to mention, I'm working with Tom Check at the Oh Wow Center, and we're talking about creating a collaboratory university kind of water provider kind of partnership project that we can link universities with water providers, because there's a ton of research happening at universities that I don't know about, and maybe some other people don't know about, and certainly water providers can benefit from this, not only in the engineering sections or water resources field, but also behavioral science. Water conservation is very much a behavioral science, and there's a lot of research out there that can help utilities do their programs better and interact with their customers better. So that's a really exciting thing. We just had a meeting yesterday actually on it, and it's going to be kind of neat, and we'll see how that goes. We're going to start with some living laboratories, hopefully get campuses on board, get some good baseline information, do projects on campuses while taking students that are in different fields and bringing them together to work on projects on their campus in the water conservation realm. So we're hoping, or kind of excited for that. It might turn out to be a pretty nice thing. And funding, of course, everybody needs more money, but the thing is about conservation, it is one of the most inexpensive things we can do, and we can help close this gap with water we already have. We can be more efficient with it, but there's more and more complicated projects that come up that are going to cost more money, and so one of these things could be looking at that water loss training. It's not going to be cheap, but it's going to be a very, very good project to roll out in this state. Again, I'm talking. Oh, now we're on to land use. Great. So that was this is a really was kind of a hard kind of nut to crack in the plan, right? So land use is a very local control issue, and I agree with it 100%. We're not here from a state agency to say, hey, this is how you need to develop. That's not our role at all, and it shouldn't be. And I think that the best ideas do come from the local level, but if we can marry our resources and to that knowledge, then I think we can go a long ways. And just some of the things that we had in there, looking at tax incentives for buildings and green building and developments with maybe higher levels of density or different land use patterns, TAP fees, structured impact tax fees. That's a huge piece to this. Utilities have connection fees for their paper supply, but there's a way that you can do this where you link it, and I think Mark's going to talk a little bit about that, where you can link it to rate structures and really get a good package where you can have a water budget set for a site, and how much water is going to be used in that site, and you can give an incentive for a tap fee that's saying, okay, we're going to use be denser, we're going to use lower water landscape, we're going to use high efficiency fixtures, we're going to do all X, Y, Z, and they can get a decreased tap fee for that. But you close the back barn door with that, and you say, hey, but you have a water budget now, you have a rate structure that will hold you to that, because the developer can do that, but then they're gone, they're not paying the bills, and the person living there or occupying that building is. So these are things that kind of tie into the land use thing, and also really linking comprehensive plans with water supply and demand management plans. I think it's a really important thing to do. That alone might not save water, but it gets the conversation going in that, and it sets the objectives forward so that you can include these things in your zoning as you go forward. Funding, so again, we can put our water efficiency grant fund towards this, maybe some water supply reserve account. So that's something we're doing so far. I'll talk about a project in a minute that we're using some money for that as well. And education training. So Senator Roberts had authored a bill last, I think it was 2015, Senate Bill 8, that said, hey, CWCB and DOLA, you come up with some land use trainings and incorporate it into the conservation plans as well that you review. And so this is another idea of partnerships that we're working with DOLA that I hadn't worked with before, and we're developing this curriculum for land use planning and integrating water resource planning and land use planning together in local municipalities. And again, a big part of this is bringing elected officials along as well. Bringing these folks in a room, creating a team so that they can learn from each other and see how their processes work, and really integrate these two disciplines a little bit closer, so that you can kind of determine a little bit better, what's your future demand going to be, how are you going to develop, how are you going to grow, and we're hoping to have that probably done by midsummer, have a whole curriculum with webinars and all those things. Plus, as a little plug for the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute conference, there's a workshop on Wednesday, March 9th. And that's an all-day workshop. We're bringing in a number of folks from the water world, from the land use world, bringing them together to present on different strategies and how they do this in their own backyard. And again, just really quickly, a list of projects. One of the things, the Colorado Water and Growth Dialogue, you guys saw a presentation from this, I think this last summer here at Water Congress. But it's a project that we're helping fund and working on with the Keystone Policy Center. And it's really looking at quantifying, well, what happens if you reduce the size of single-family lots and you create a more dense environment? What happens to the demand in water out in the future? What happens if you shift away from less single-family to multifamily? And those kind of things, and looking at different demand land use patterns and the effects on demand out in the future. So right now we're working with Denver Water and Aurora for their water, on their water data, and then overlaid onto these service areas and seeing what it might look like. They're still working through the model and getting it worked out, and we're working with Dr. Cog as well on that, and just trying to get an idea, say, hey, what happens if we do this? Can we get a sense of what kind of magnitude we're talking about? Does it matter or does it not matter? Another study was a net zero water initiative, and it's a little misnomer. Net zero is more like net neutral, really kind of looking at what happens when you build a site and you use the water that comes onto the site as a supply, basically. And you're using that, and you're basically diminishing your draw on the demand for these sites, and how do you design those things? And the Brendel Group created this up in Fort Collins, and they've got a great toolbox. And basically, it just says we're focused on the building level, but as you expand out into the town level, city level, maybe watershed level, what does that look like? And it's kind of a fascinating thing. There's a number of other groups around the nation are working on this stuff. And also, there's a Water Research Foundation that I'm serving on a project advisory committee for that's focusing on land use and patterns in water supply, and really looking at stormwater and how you design these places and what kind of supply can you bring in off of rainwater, stormwater. They're looking across the nation at some of these things too. So just some of the things that are happening that we had in the water plan, and kind of shows you that connection between land use and water demand. And I think Wayne wants to give his color commentary.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. We were working on this with Kevin, and I have to acknowledge Kevin. He's done such a spectacular job. He was so patient with all of us on the subcommittee and the IBCC and the CBCB to really help with a lot of this work. But from a water provider perspective, I'm going to share a little bit why this conversation, especially with this panel coming up, is so important. Because to achieve or strive to achieve that aspirational goal is going to require more than just providing rebates. It's going to require more than just sending very talented people out to visit with customers and educate them on efficient use of water for their indoor and outdoor uses. It's going to be a lot more than that. You look at the market penetration of technologies and behaviors needed to achieve these aspirational goal. You simply can't get there with those elements and those tools that we've traditionally used. And that's why we're moving into the conversation about water use and regulations and those kinds of things out into the future, and what that means to the future to really get to that goal. Because at a certain point, you just reach that point of diminishing returns. You just can't get there with the traditional methods that we've employed for the last 15 years, and we've been very successful at employing those. But that low-hanging fruit is largely gone. And so now we're going to have to look for new places to stretch those water supplies, both the current ones and the future ones that are coming up. So that's kind of the perspective from the water provider perspective, at least mine in Colorado Springs, and how we look at that. But I did want to, at this point, let's see, we have a survey that we wanted to give everyone a try and kind of gauge the audience's knowledge or understanding of water conservation that we're gonna run. So my understanding, the voice of God is going to come and tell us what to do.